The attack, the rescue, and the announcement. The diamonds are in our hands. Minute by minute in Operation Arnon, which came out of a well-written Hollywood movie. One day after the dramatic operation to free 4 Israeli hostages, we're still processing everything that we just saw, and the IDF is releasing new details. This new information is super exciting, even as Iran sends a message of its own through the Lebanese proxy Hezbollah. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on the 248th day of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the Houthis. In the heart of the Nusirat refugee camp in the Gaza Strip, one of the most daring operations since the beginning of the war took place. Noah Argamani, Almog Meir, Shlomi Ziv, and Andrei Kozlov, all of whom were kidnapped from the Nova Party on October 7th, were rescued in Operation Arnon. This operation gets its name from Arnon Zamora, the commander of the Yamam anti-terrorism police force, who led the rescue efforts and was killed in combat. On Thursday evening at 6:30 p.m., the operation got the green light from the political echelon. After careful planning, exercises, and models, and advanced intelligence surveillance that lasted for many weeks, the operation, initially called Summer Seeds, was approved. The confirmation was made in a classified discussion, and everybody was waiting for the right moment. To set the stage, the 2 multi-story buildings where the hostages were being held were a few hundred yards away from each other. This complicated the planning and execution of the rescue. Also complicated things was the fact that Palestinian civilians lived in these buildings as well, surrounding the hostages and the armed guards who were holding them. However, the plans were made to overcome these and other difficulties, and on Saturday at 10 a.m., 2 commando teams rushed into position from several directions toward the Nusirat refugee camp near the coast. The forces moved undetected in broad daylight, secretly, to the 2 buildings where the abductees were held, with thousands of Palestinians and hundreds of terrorists from the local Hamas battalion amongst them. Throughout the entire operation, the Air Force had electronic eyes on the battlefield, using drones and long-range surveillance technologies that allowed the ground troops to have real-time situational awareness and constant updates. At 11 a.m., the 2 teams on the ground received the order to act, which was personally approved in real time by the head of the Shin Bet and the IDF Chief of Staff. They attacked the buildings simultaneously and in full coordination at the same second to prevent the terrorists in the second target from discovering this, which would endanger the hostages. While the elimination of the terrorists guarding Argamani and the rescue went relatively smoothly, the operation in the second building was much more complicated. Zamora's commander's team reported shortly after the shooting began that he had been wounded in the exchange of fire. The fighters who eliminated the terrorists at the target took care of their commander and tried to save him on the way out of the building under increasing fire. At 11:15 a.m., the announcement that everyone was waiting for is reported. The diamonds are in our hands, meaning that the hostages have been recovered. However, the timeline for the plan had been slightly thrown off by Zamora getting hit, and the terrorists took advantage of this delay to bring hundreds of heavily armed fighters into the area. Showing a complete lack of concern for their own civilians, these terrorists began firing wildly at the Israelis, spraying bullets and RPG rockets in all directions. This is further proof that the terrorist organization Hamas uses the civilian population as a human shield, even their own families. Furthermore, this operation to rescue the abductees exposed a lie about the non-involved Palestinian civilians who have no part in the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Many of these non-involved civilians have been shown to be taking an active part in the Hamas operations, including by holding Israeli hostages in their civilian residential apartments. In fact, all 7 of the hostages that the IDF has released so far, Noah Argamani, Almog Meir, Andrei Kozlov, and Shlomi Ziv in Nusirat, Fernando Shirmon Merman and Luis Har in Rafah, and the soldier Ori Magadish were being held in civilian apartments. Many of the uninvolved civilians who lived in the buildings and neighborhoods where these hostages were being held knew all about it, but most of them were silent. Hamas itself, in order not to be portrayed as someone who was negligent in guarding the abductees, admitted time and time again that the Israeli prisoners who were released were with civilians and not in the hands of Hamas. This provides another piece of evidence for those who still needed it, how involved the uninvolved civilians are in Hamas terrorism. Beyond that, let's take a look back at something that most of the world has long forgotten. For several years, before October 7th, 20,000 uninvolved Palestinians from Gaza entered Israel every day to work at jobs provided for them by the very communities that were attacked on that awful day on October 7th. These uninvolved civilians were employed in communities all over the surrounding area of the Gaza Strip, including larger communities like Sderot and Ofakim. Some of these uninvolved civilians were writing down details which they then passed on to Hamas so the attacks on these communities could be prepared. All kinds of details were passed on, including the number of residents and bedrooms in different communities, the locations of the guard houses, the very beds where the guards and their families slept at night, how many family members live in each house, where the cars were packed, etc. All of these details were passed on to Hamas, and they used them to plan their devastating assault on October 7th. After October 7th, evidence of the involvement of these uninvolved civilians continued to appear. Massive amounts of weapons and ammunition, weapons factories, and tunnel entrances were discovered in the homes of these uninvolved civilians. As recently as the previously mentioned rescue of Israeli hostages on Saturday, some of these uninvolved civilians actively participated in the attempts to attack the Israeli troops as they tried to bring the hostages to safety. The list of events in which the uninvolved civilians of Gaza were involved in active combat operations against the IDF grows on and includes passive support for those operations, holding Israeli hostages, and more. In 2006, there were elections held in Gaza, the last elections that were ever held there. And in those elections, hundreds of thousands of Gazans voted for the political party sponsored by Hamas. The Fatah party, which dominates the Palestinian Authority and which is sometimes described as moderate, was utterly defeated in those elections, and a few months later, the Palestinian Authority was violently rooted out of the Gaza Strip entirely, and Hamas took full control of the territory. The uninvolved civilians of Gaza who voted for Hamas in those elections knew full well that the charter of the organization calls for the destruction of Israel and the mass murder of Jews. These people knew exactly what they were voting for. Although there hasn't been any more elections in the Gaza Strip since then, polls in Gaza's residents has consistently shown over the years that the support for Hamas remains high among the population. As a side note, polls of Palestinians in the West Bank and the eastern neighborhoods of Jerusalem also show that these populations have also high levels of support for Hamas in general and the massacre of October 7th in particular. That is why it is important that we continue to spread the truth, share and follow us, and take an active part in spreading the truth on social media networks. If you want to receive more videos like this one, please consider making a financial donation by going to our website at www.tbn.org/Israel or clicking the donate button on this YouTube channel. Noah Argamani, who was rescued from Hamas captivity yesterday, told her family members quite a few things about the difficult time in captivity. She said that she moved through 4 different apartments, was in danger of her life several times, and that she did not know that she had become known all over the world, and that the story of her kidnapping was widely covered. She described the first moment when she realized that forces had come to rescue her. Suddenly, the door opened and the soldier said, "Hello, Noah, this is the IDF." Noah said that during the first period of captivity, food was scarce, and then she was transferred to a home of another family where she received a little more food. In the last house, where she was kept, she was put to work cleaning and washing the dishes after meals. On the morning of the rescue, Noah was washing dishes when suddenly she heard a scream from the living room. She noticed masked men who told her that they were from the IDF forces. At first, I thought they were trying to figure me out and I didn't move. He asked me, "Can I lift you on my shoulders?" Then I realized it was happening. Noah said that on the way to the rescue point, the truck got stuck. It was scary. She added, "The fighters were brave. It was a matter of a second and I could not be here today." Noah, I want to tell you that the heart of all the people of Israel is with you. I send a prayer of peace to you and your mother, thanking God that she was able to fight off the cancer she's suffering from long enough to see you free once again. To the other hostages who were rescued, I want to welcome you home as well, and along with you, I raise a prayer for the peace of all the hostages still being held in Gaza. Our hearts are with you. Please, for the sake of the hostages, continue to spread the truth together. Share and follow us on social media networks and subscribe to this YouTube channel. This war is being fought on multiple fronts and we need the world to know who we are fighting and why. So join us in spreading the truth. Speaking of the truth, an alarming situation developed in the last 24 hours in the border region near the southern Gaza city of Rafah. Several terrorists managed to penetrate Israeli territory near the Kerem Shalom crossing, although they were quickly intercepted and confronted by IDF troops. Most of the terrorists were eliminated with the assistance of the Air Force and nearby armored units. Now, switching our focus to the northern border between Israel and Lebanon, which is right here behind me. You see this mountain in my background? There is reason to believe that the really hard part of all of this is just getting started. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Ali Bagheri Kani, warned Israel this week in an interview with the Turkish-language CNN channel that his government would fully support Hezbollah in any war against Israel. Meanwhile, an Israeli Air Force jet attacked and eliminated a terrorist squad that had fired several anti-aircraft missiles at them. This attempt to shoot down Israeli aircrafts is a serious escalation in an already tense situation. The IDF continues with moves to increase readiness for war on the northern border. Recently, units of the paratrooper brigade, which were previously deployed in Gaza, have completed training exercises meant to prepare them for the terrain in southern Lebanon. The war in the north is a war of deterrence, intimidation, and attrition that Hezbollah has been waging against Israel since October 8th, and it continues to be characterized by a controlled escalation. From time to time, Hezbollah will try and increase the pressure on Israel by firing rockets a bit deeper into Israeli territory or introducing new weapons into the battlefield. This is usually in response to a painful lesson that the IDF has taught them by hitting one of their senior field commanders or some other important targets. Or it might be to show more tangible solidarity with Hamas in Gaza and with the residents of the Gaza Strip who are suffering from the events of the war, and to try to restrict the IDF's freedom of action in the south and north. However, Israel is showing increasing impatience in view of the continuation of the conflict in these characteristics, including the damage described as unbearable in life and property and the suffering of the evacuated population. Along with this is the uncertainty regarding the future, as well as the need to ensure that this reality will remove the threat of an October 7th style terrorist attack in the north. Above all, the general sense of vulnerability and developments in the international system are bringing Israel closer to making a decision on the policy change vis-à-vis Lebanon. However, before moving on to a powerful campaign in Lebanon, the purpose of which is not yet clear, it is important to create optimal conditions for its success, especially when it is clear that it will involve significant losses. Beyond the training of the forces that has been underway for some time, it is important to ensure American support, which does not exist at the moment, to determine the goals of the war and to create a solid strategic basis for embarking on this campaign. This base should be founded on the realization of the goals of the war in Gaza, victory over the Hamas organization in the sense of collapsing its operational frameworks and significantly damaging its leaders and operatives. It will also need to include removing Hamas from power and clarifying that they will not return to rule Gaza, as well as the release of the hostages, if necessary, by means of further military operations. And then it will be possible to face the challenge of Hezbollah and its patron, Iran. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on the issue in details, but we need your help and support. So please continue to spread the truth, share and follow us on social media networks, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. The most important thing that we can do is pray. Pray for the IDF soldiers who are defending all of us against these evil organizations in the north, in the Gaza Strip, and in Judea and Samaria. Pray for the hostages to be released. And most importantly, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.